Ahoy! New World Update 4.0.3 is coming out today, and it's coming with some controversial changes. Who would expect any different at this point, to be honest? This one is coming out at 11 PM PT on January 23, and it's a 1.5 patch and the end of the Crisis event, but there are also some changes. First of all, in terms of changes here, we have a rare issue that prevented players from transferring between worlds and crashes when leaving and entering expeditions. The season quest line has been made a lot easier, with various of the instanced bosses here dealing less damage, having less health, that newer players can complete it as well, and you don't need to be geared as well for it. Along with that, the Ice Cold Killer task and the Journey tab, where you have to kill 150 players in PvP, counted more than one kill if players assisted with the elimination. The bigger day for us are, of course, the combat changes. They added additional transition frames when cancelling the Rain of Arrows bow to prevent an exploit. Bow has had a lot of issues lately when it comes to animation cancels and so on, that allowed it to deal a lot more damage than intended in some ways, and this is one of these being fixed. They also fixed an issue that caused players to lose attributes from the Magnify perk upon entering a game mode or teleporting. They will continue to monitor this issue and make further updates if necessary. This is something that, for example, happened with the Ring Blood Drink, I think it is, where the Magnify and one of the effects would actually get lost sometimes when teleporting. They fixed an issue that prevented blocks from cancelling heavy charges. Now, I am wondering what exactly that means. There are certain different outcomes here. For example, there's one way where you kind of end up canceling, but your block doesn't go off properly. Very niche case. Then there is the fact that blocks are only possible until a certain part of a heavy attack charge. So I'm not sure if that means this is effectively going to be possible later in the animation of the attack, which would be potentially fairly strong. So love to see what exactly is behind this. Is it just a minor bug fix, or if there's actually a mechanics change here that could be utilized? They also fixed an issue that prevented elemental conversion gems on weapons with a PvE or PvP damage split from applying the damage equally. This is something that I've already talked about. This is the issue that basically caused elemental damage to be higher in PvP than intended because it didn't get the reduction applied. What is interesting here is that this mentions the gems, but it does not mention Boltcaster, which was specifically, somewhat disabled, some of the effects were disabled on it in order to balance it for now. So I don't know if that's actually reverted with this patch because it doesn't say here. We'll have to find out if that's the case or not. And we'll, of course, have to see if the gem fix actually is fully working, if it's working for abilities as well and so on. I hope they really figured out a blanket solution here, not just another band-aid for the band-aid. The next change is extremely interesting. Legendary Fish. To set the groundwork for cooking trade skill changes coming next season, Legendary Fish will now require a higher luck stat to catch. Now, my theory here is that this will mean we will be able to use Legendary Fish for the highest tier recipes. That's bananas at the moment. And obviously, bananas are fairly easy to farm. It's not really much to it. And it does feel weird that you can get bananas easier than you can get the Legendary Fish, but bananas give you the better stat food. So my line of thinking here is that maybe the stat food will be upgraded in a way where fish cooked food is on the same level as banana, or it will be used for other new food. I mean, we have, for example, the hot pot that's coming in the new event that just provides a completely new effect. Maybe if they are doing other changes there, we might get other food with new effects. So that's going to be very interesting. Hold on to your Legendary Fish. They fixed an issue that caused corrupted breach enemies to sometimes spawn underground, and that would kind of lock the portals as well. And they also fixed the invisible laser issue finally, where lasers could go invisible but still damage you. They fixed the issue that caused the winged shoes to always extend the duration of haste when equipped instead of upon the effect's activation, so I'm assuming they are re-enabling them as well. They're not mentioning that here, but it would make sense. We have a bunch of quest-specific fixes here. We have one for Jonas, that is, I think, for the main quest line. Then there is a fix with SLOTH location being incorrectly shown, a bug for a specific group of players who abandoned the Season 1 quest Cannon and Coin part way that couldn't progress properly, and another one with the Rage of the Mammoth and the Garden of the Gorgon quests that will allow players to skip the Soul Trial. But the next one here is much more important. The number of PvP flagged players allowed near influence towers and forts will be decreased to test performance improvements. We'll continue to monitor performance and make additional changes as necessary. So first of all, keep in mind they say this is to test performance improvements. This is not set in stone. But of course, this is a strange change, because one of the problems that we have with open world races at the moment is if there are actually a lot of people participating, then they get blocked from entering the area and they get teleported out and kind of just have to sit on the outside and wait, which is always a big frustration factor. What this does at the same time, and I think Dave mentioned this yesterday, and I wasn't quite sure what he was referring to because we didn't actually know that this was going to happen yet, but it does benefit races insofar that if you have a faction imbalance, then that will be slightly less noticeable. Like if the cap for each group is now 25 and you only have 20 purples, but you have 30 greens, then those would go down to 25 versus 20, which would be a bit more even, a bit more fair in that regard. And again, they want to do this for performance at the same time. But it's a big trade-off, I think, to not be able to fight with as many players. I also think that of all the things about influence races, this is just like a very minor factor. I saw some discussion about this on Reddit, and I think some people made some very good points that I very much would echo here as well, which is that it would be much more important for influence races to in general be rewarding, worth doing, make the influence race caches good, give it a good amount of faction tokens, maybe make the drops a little bit better, that the random drops that can drop there, and just give people a reason to do it, so people in general want to participate in races, and then give them reasons to go to the different points in however way you want to do that. Because at the moment, way too much is still tied to the, well, I guess the race part of the influence race, the faction mission running, which I have repeated many times, I think is completely horrible. I think it's the worst part of the entire influence race. I think it should not exist at all. I think they should just outright remove it. And at the moment, that's still the only way that you can actually gain influence as a company that wants to put in a declare, because the points are just there to gain like the overall influence, but they don't actually contribute to your individual company. And I don't think that should be the case at all. I think that should be handled completely differently. I think the points should be priority, so all companies have reason to fight over the points, and then obviously with enough reason to also fight over the separate points. And that would split up the players a little bit, so this whole numbers thing may be less of an issue. But at the same time, obviously, it could increase the general popularity of influence races, which I don't think is a bad thing. So if that happens to be the case, then they could still consider adding more points, or they could do various other things to encourage PvP outside of the points without making it the stupid mission running. Again, a lot of flexibility, a lot that could be done here to make races much better. Many of the steps that could be taken fairly easily, whereas this step is a very small step, almost backwards, I would say. I'd rather have slightly worse performance in influence races and not get teleported out than have better performance and a higher risk of getting teleported out, as it stands at the moment at least, because the teleporting aspect is one of the most frustrating ones in the races, especially if you end up getting teleported to town. Last but not least, they also fixed an issue that caused Summer Metal Fair event quests to appear outside of the event. So quite a few changes of different kinds. We'll have to see which ones are actually fully fixed and what will happen with influence races. If you want to hear more about that or other games like Palworld, then consider subscribing and clicking the bell to get notified of upcoming videos. And if you'd like to support me further, then you can do so on Patreon. Thanks to my patrons, where I do exactly that. And thank you for watching. Sloth, out.